So we ready to learn some React? This one looks like it's the one-time password generator for FreeCodeCamp using React. That's what we're doing in this one. And if this is your first time watching the channel, my name is Rob. I'm a co-named instructor for FreeCodeCamp, where we kind of go through these FreeCodeCamp modules and we try to explain them from an instructor point of view. So if that's something that you are looking to do, then you came to the right channel. And all we ask if to do is give us a real quick like, and then feel free to comment down below. That's all we ask, right? So let's go ahead and get started. Let's see if we can solve this stuff together, okay? All right, so a real brief overview on what we're actually doing with this is it says that we're going to be building a one-time password generator. This is for FreeCodeCamp, and it wants us to build an app that has a functionality very similar to this example right here. So let's go and take a peek. So it looks like we have some basic header text on here, maybe another paragraph or another H2 or 3, I don't know. And we have this generate OTP button. And so when I click on this button, notice that I get a countdown timer already started. So I know that we're probably gonna need a timer. I know that we probably are gonna need to have some sort of conditional rendering for this. And then this has some sort of number. And I don't know if we're generating these randomly. I haven't looked at the task, but I don't know if it's an array of numbers that it picks from, or are we just getting a real randomized number. So anyways, when we generate the OTP again, notice that we get a new number, and then we get another countdown timer. And once that timer has expired, it looks like it shows this. So it looks like we have, like I said, a lot going on. And if I click on this, we have this showing. But then it goes away when we click on it and we get some number. Like I said, let's see what we have to do with some of these user stories, and maybe we can come up with a plan of attack. So it says in this lab, you're going to generate a 6-digit OTP, one-time password that will display to the user. That OTP will be expired after 5 seconds. And then a new OTP must be generated when the user clicks generate new OTP. And something else that I don't know if I brought up, but when we clicked that button, I couldn't click it again until the timer ran out. So you see, I have like this little no on my mouse cursor here. That button is definitely disabled during the countdown timer. So it says on here that the objective, fulfill all the user stories, make sure all the tests pass, and we should utilize useEffect hook for the countdown timer. Your OTP generator component should also return a div element with the class of container. So this kind of looks like how we're going to structure the stuff out. And then looks like this is all the stuff that we need to have in there. Let me go ahead and go through this here. So it says we need to have an H1 element with a class name, or I guess with an ID of this. Okay, so that's an H1. And then there's the H2, click to generate. And then it says that this thing also will display this text at first, but then it will always show the OTP if one is available. Okay, so I'm thinking ternary in my head already. We need to have a paragraph element with an ID of opt timer, okay, and an aria live, and it will have a valid value. So it's going to start off empty, and it says it's going to display expires in blank amount of seconds after the button is clicked, where the X represents the remaining time before the OTP expires. Then it says show the message, click on the button to generate a new OTP once the countdown reaches 0. So again, maybe another ternary there of if we have a valid time that's greater than 0, then go ahead and show expires in blank amount of seconds. Otherwise, we're going to not show that. Or if it reaches 0, we'll determine that once we get to it. Then it says a button element to generate the OTP. When it is clicked, it should generate a new OTP and start a 5-second countdown. And then it says the generate OTP button must be disabled while the countdown is active. And then 4, you should ensure the countdown timer stops automatically when it reaches 0 to prevent unnecessary updates. And then the generated OTP should be 6 digits long. Okay. Cool. So we got all that. Let's go ahead and talk about break down how we're going to go about this. Okay. So I think the way that I want to kind of break this thing down with is, let's just kind of go through, these user stories here of 2 and 3. And we may not put the logic quite in there, but we'll put some placeholders in there and deal with it then. I kind of just want to get the structure of it and then apply some real quick CSS to it. And then that way we can focus on the logic. So I think that's going to be my point of attack on this. And so with anything, it says that this needs to return a div container or a div that has the class name of container. So I'm going to go ahead and do the return here, and then I'm going to do the div, and then I'm going to open and close that. And so I'm always teaching the students, hey, when we're doing this stuff, make sure you put the closing tags in there automatically. When you're utilizing like Visual Studio Code, they put them in there for you automatically. So they just want you to get used to typing it in and making sure that it looks right. Okay, so now that we have the div, let's go ahead and add the class name. And remember, class names here are Haskell cased. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that in here. And we want container. Next, it says that we need to have an H1 element with the ID of OTP title with the text in there of OTP Generator. So I'm just going to go to the next line here, keep the indentations so we can keep track of all this. And we'll do an H1, close it off, OTP Generator, and we can automatically see it showing up in the preview here. And it looks like I'm not typing this in there. Let me go ahead and do that. Perfect. And then it says it does need to have an ID, and we're going to set that equal to OTP title. Okay, moving on to the next one here. It says that we want to have an H2. This H2 element needs to have an ID of OTP display. So I'm going to go ahead, for right now, I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to alter it to be an H2. And the text in here, it says that it wants to have either or. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and put this in there just as a placeholder. And I know that, like I said, when it comes to the showing up based upon either this or that, then we're going to have to use some sort of ternary in there. But we'll do that later. I just want to make sure that I'm putting everything into place here. And then the ID, it needs to be OTP display. Okay, so I believe we have that user story done. Again, we're going to come back and display the code of the 6-digit code, okay, when one is available. Next on here, it's add a paragraph element with the ID of OTP timer, and then don't forget the ARIA live attribute, okay? So let's go ahead and put that in here. So we want the P tag element, and in here we want the ID to be set to OTP timer. And this is going to be, it looks like another one where it's going to be based upon something. So it's going to start off empty, and then it will display expires in blank amount of seconds. And so we can go ahead and put that there now, okay? And so it wants to show a message of it being either expired to click the button or once the countdown reaches 0. Okay, so we can do that stuff later. And then it says we need to have a button element. So let's go ahead and put that in. And this needs to have an ID of generate OTP button. And it needs to be labeled here with generate OTP. So let me go ahead and put that there. There we go. So now we have the button on there. Then when it's clicked, it should generate a new OTP and start a 5-second countdown. And then it says the button must be disabled when the countdown is active. Okay, so at this point here, we have everything on here. Now it's time to give it a real quick style, okay? Okay, we went ahead and styled everything. And what I'm going to do is below this video, you're going to see a link. You can go over to the link, grab the styling that we did for this. So that way it kind of looks like it. Gave it a nice little button that looks like it's a little 3D button that we're pushing down on. All right, I'll let you guys do that. And then you can jump right back in and we're going to start breaking things down logic-wise. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in some state for this. And the things that I'm thinking about, what do we need to keep track of? And the things that come to my mind are how many seconds are left, okay? And we can also create a state variable to store the random number that we're supposed to give for the OTP. So let's go ahead and put both of those in a state variable. So let's do the first one. We'll do the OTP for the random number. So we'll do const, and then we got to use those square brackets, right? And we want this one to be OTP, comma, set OTP. And then we want to set that equal to useState. And we want to set this up at the very beginning as being empty. So that's a null, okay? Next, let's go ahead and add in the how many seconds are remaining. So we'll do seconds left. You get rid of this. And then we'll do set seconds left. And then we're going to set that equal to useState as well. And for now, we're going to set that to 0. Okay. So I think that as far as the state management goes, those are the two things that we probably need at this point. If we need any more, it's okay to go back and add them in. You don't always have to come up with a solution altogether. But these are just off the top of my head real quick on what are the things that we want to track. And then now with these pieces of information, we might be able to go down below in the JSX and say, okay, let's go ahead and add in some more useState, or let's go ahead and make this logic work down here. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do next. So immediately what we can go ahead and do real quick is, if you remember our H2 element that we built out earlier, we put in this generic code right here, which is click to generate the OTP to get a code. But we only want to show this if the OTP hasn't been generated before. The very first time it hasn't been generated, it's null. And so that's what we want to show. And otherwise, we want to show what the OTP is. You know, what's that random number? And so let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this and put it on my clipboard. So all I have to do is paste later. And I want to make this a ternary, okay? And whenever I'm teaching this to students in the class, and we're talking about ternaries, I'll spell out the ternary as well as it will work. But then I'm going to show you that we can refactor it real quick to make it cleaner and leaner. And so what we kind of start off with is, hey, if the OTP is not null, then we want to show the OTP, okay? Otherwise, we want to show that text of click generate, okay? So this is the part here where I'm saying, hey, this is the ternary. We are taking an evaluation that gives us something truthy or falsy. And as long as it's not null, then I want you to show the number that was randomly generated. Otherwise, I want it to generate the OTP. So how can we kind of show the other way? So eventually we're going to be getting a number, right? And we want it to show the number and not show that text that says click to generate OTP. Okay, so that's where I was kind of going at with this. And so if I change this back to null, I'll show you how we can refactor this to make it look a little cleaner. And what you would probably see in your own real dev work is you wouldn't see this because you can totally get by with this, okay? This by itself is either going to be truthy or falsy. And you can see we get the same results doing it like that, okay? Save yourself some writing, but just know you might want to pencil that in, put it in your notebook, that when we're doing the ternaries like this, that gave me the same exact answer and shortened up my code just a little bit, okay? So let me change that back to null, and that totally checkmarked us for this one. Both of these are checkmarked done. Now it's time to go in here and clean up some more stuff. And I noticed in my P element, I just realized this, I do need to put an aria live in there. And so we'll go ahead and put that in there with a valid value. And so we'll come in here to the paragraph element and set that equal to assert. Okay, cool. All right, let's see what else we can do here. All right, so I think the thing that I'd like to work on next is the button. So when we click this button that we have over here, I want it to go ahead and generate me a new number. And then we'll worry about getting the timer to work and then displaying the text. So I think that's how I'm going to kind of think about getting this to work. So with that being said, let's go ahead and create a simple function up here. We're going to call it handle generate OTP. Okay. And inside here, this is where we want to generate it, okay? But I think what I'm going to do to keep the code kind of clean is I'm going to create like an outside function here that will actually generate this random number. In order for this to happen, I'm just going to create a new variable here to store this function. I'm going to call it generate OTP. And like I said, its full purpose here is to simply create a random number. And so for that, we're going to do math.floor. And because we want a certain amount of digits, we want to use 10,000 here. And then we want to add random number that is anywhere between 1 and 9,000. Okay, cool. So this should help us generate that random number that we need. And so we can come down here and we need to update our setter. So we want to set the OTP and we are going to give it the generate the OTP, and we want that left and right parenthesis to be on there. Okay. So now that we created this function, we can see that it's not being used right now because it's kind of grayed out. And so that's where we can come down here to the button and we can add an on-click event. And we want to set that to our function that we created up there, which is handle generate and then OTP. Okay. So now hopefully we get something that we would like to see. And I think, let me change this to 100,000. And I believe now that should work out just fine. Okay, let's generate this. It's not working. Let's see why. Looks like I should read the console here. I misspelled random. I said random. So math.random. All right. So I got no errors in the console. Let's click it. And there we go. And we can see that we're getting the random numbers, but our timer's not working, and then our button needs to be disabled while the timer's running. And that's what we're going to work on next. Now that we got the random numbers working, I think that would be a good point to kind of go to. All right, let's work on it next. Okay, so let's work on the timing. And I feel like what I want to do first is we created this seconds left up here. And when we click the handle generate OTP, we need to reset the timer to be whatever it is. It might be 5 seconds. So let's do that. So we can come down here and we can do set seconds left. And what do we want to set that to? For now, we can put in 5, and that will update that to 5 seconds. Okay. And I feel like we need to have a useEffect in here, and that is going to be our timer, or it's going to have our timer in it. And let's go ahead and create a useEffect. So I'm going to do a useEffect. And remember, useEffects, they take a function here, and then followed by, for now, we can put in these square brackets. So what do we want to put in our useEffect? Well, we need to run this effect. And my thinking in this is we create a variable outside of this useEffect to let us know whether or not the counter is actively counting. And so what I'll do here is above this function, I'll create a new variable. And this does not have to be a state variable, but we can derive it from the state, okay? Meaning that we can say something like this. We can say, is this app counting, right? So is our timer counting? And how can we determine that? As long as our seconds left is greater than 0, we know that the counter is working, okay? That's like a little outside variable that we can determine from state that will give us either a true or a false. And so down here, we can keep track of this variable. And so we want to say, hey, we want to use this effect here. We want to run this, but we want to first run it only if you detect a change in is counting. So what kind of logic do we want to run in here? If the counting is not running, okay, if the counting is not counting, then don't need to do anything. And so that's where we'll do a real quick if check. We can say if is counting is false, right? So if is counting is false, just simply return. get out of here. We don't need you to do anything. But if isCounting is true, so think about it logically, when is isCounting true? Well, when we click that button, okay, we are setting the seconds left to 5. Now, from React's point of view, every single time a useState variable updates, this page gets reloaded, which means every time it gets reloaded, isCounting is going to be ran and evaluated. Again, that's what we're trying to go with here. And so the useEffect, if isCounting, meaning like if we're not counting, then we're just going to exit. Next in here, we want to go ahead and set up the timer to start removing the seconds left down by 1 every single time. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we are going to create a variable to house the interval. So we're going to do const interval ID. And we kind of did this one with the previous lesson as well. And we're going to do a set interval, and it takes in a function. And then we put a comma here is, now this is the time in milliseconds on when or how often do we want this to run. So inside here is where we are going to take the set seconds left, and we want to really evaluate what the previous seconds were. So we can do prev seconds, and we can return 1 being subtracted from it. So we can do something like this, prev seconds left minus 1. And then down here, it's just good measure whenever we are collapsing useEffect is we clear out the intervals here. So we're going to return, we're going to do the clear interval, and all we have to do is supply the interval ID. Okay. Like I said, I believe we have every single thing that we need logic-wise in order to complete the JavaScript or the JSX that we have down below. So let's work on that next, and then we'll clean everything up. Okay, so now that we got the timer working, we can do a real quick check on it by attacking the button. And what do I mean by that? We can add in a real quick attribute on the button because we do need to disable it while the timer is active, or while the app is counting, we want to disable it. So we can come in here, add our disabled attribute, and then we can put in our variable of isCounting, because if that happens to be true, then guess what? The button will be disabled. So that's what we're looking for here. We're going to go ahead and generate the OTP, and notice that I get the little button. I can't click on it, and it should last for about 5 seconds. Perfect. All right, so we know that our timer works. Now it's just time to add some more conditional logic to get it to display these things properly here, because we can totally knock this out here fairly quickly. Let's go ahead and work on it. Okay, so this is the part where we are working on next, which is this paragraph element, and it says it needs to start off empty, and then we also need to display it expires in X amount of seconds if the timer is active, or if isCounting is true, display that. And then the other way that we will display the other part on here, which is the OTPs expired, click on the button to generate. That is going to be shown if we've already generated one before, that you see up here, and it has already expired and gone down to 0. Otherwise, it just wants it to be blank. Okay. So there's several ways to go about this, and I'm going to try to do it in the cleanest way. And I'm going to shove this over just so we can get a little more real estate. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to come here and I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to put it on my clipboard by doing a Control X or Command X on a Mac. And now that is cut. So here is where we can go ahead, and I'm going to put in the curly brackets, and I'm going to evaluate isCounting. So if we are currently actively counting, then, like I said, we want to show, I'm going to put backticks on here because I know that we're going to need to do some percolating, and I need to get rid of this X. So I want to show expires in seconds, right? And so I can come in here, do the $ curly brackets, and I can put in here seconds left. Okay. Or, so here's the or part. This is where we have to do another really quick evaluation, but we're going to do it with the and operator. So as long as we have an OTP, okay, which is the 6-digit number, then I want to go ahead and show the OTP is expired. And then we want to show them, hey, go ahead and click that button to generate a new OTP. Okay. And I believe that might fix it here. So this is exactly what we want to show at the very beginning. Let's go ahead and generate an OTP. So we should see the numbers, and then we should see the second countdown. There it goes. 4, 3, 2, 1. The OTP's expired. Go ahead and click the button to generate a new OTP. Okay. So I do want to double check to make sure I got that spelling right on what they wanted. Perfect. Okay. So I think that fits the narrative for every single one. And you can play around with this all you want. Play around with the styling. But I think we got everything. Let's go ahead and run these tests and see where we failed. We don't fail. So you made it this far. Thank you so much for watching. We learned a few things in this, which is, the is counting. We can just make that a variable, and we can still evaluate that with useEffect and set up those timers and manage them. We saw some ternaries down there in the JSX. We added some custom styling to make it look a little unique. So anyways, hopefully you got what you needed out of this video. Please know that just because you finished this video, this challenge, it's going to take practice. And if this video helped, that's great. But just know that just because you're struggling, that's really good at this point that you are struggling with some of these things, because it's going to be those struggles that are going to pull you out, because you're going to be like, oh, I remember that. We covered that in this video. Or let me go back to my notes. I know I've seen this error before, or I've seen this type of logic before by doing the ternaries. So you're going to remember, and it's perfectly okay that you can't just regurgitate it right now off the top of your brain. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.